Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our session, Integrating Renewables into the Grid. I am the moderator, Stefan Singer, WWF International. I welcome you all, and moreover, I welcome our very sophisticated and excellent panel of experts, practitioners, and business people who are all involved in the issue of renewables, grids, and the like. What we are doing here is basically, I will give a short introduction, and then I will ask my peer panelists and colleagues to have each a 2-minute elevator pitch, couple of questions for them, and then we open up directly for questions and answers among my fellow peers here on the panel, but also for you to ask questions. And once you ask a question, please identify yourself. That would be great. So, and on the name of everyone, I think on the panel, I'm happy to say we thank Masdar and the World Future Energy Summit of inviting us and providing us with the opportunity for this important talk. The issue of integrating renewables into the grid is an emerging issue which gains momentum in many countries, in particular as more and more variable weather-dependent power enters the grid. Weather-dependent renewables, wind and solar in particular. And we have some countries where this is an issue, where it's being matched and comparably well matched. For instance, the country Denmark has had over the year in 2014 about 39% wind power as share of the overall electricity output. I just learned today that the country I'm living in, I'm German, but I'm living in Belgium, has announced today they want to have offshore wind in less than 10 years, providing about 50% of all household electricity. I don't have to tell you much about Germany, but some of our utilities and some of our transmission system operators have to cope with up to 40 and 50% variable power in the grid. And so far they do that pretty well. Good grid management, good load management is a key condition. But how are we going to do that? What are the political and the technical challenges? And I hope some of those issues, not only in those countries, but also in other countries, where those issues will emerge, will be part of the political and technical debate, not the least in developing countries increasingly, but also in this region. So I hope we can stress a couple of issue experiences and points on how to make that happen in the most economically effective way. Thank you. So my first, ladies first, as usual, I would like to give the floor first to our colleague, Ms. Dotzenrath from E.ON, one of the largest utilities. Ms. Dotzenrath, E.ON created some kind of shockwaves recently, positive ones, I'm inclined to say, on its recent announcement towards shift in its so-called, its more or less old-fashioned business model. The new E.ON is now, it's a question to you, a powerful clean energy player, not only in Germany, but globally, where you already have majority of assets on grids and renewables.
Well, thank you very much for this question. I heard this question somehow before, and I'm very happy to talk a little bit about it. I'm representing, so to say, both worlds in E.ON, the global, the conventional generation business and the renewables business. I'm a board member in our integrated generation business. So and as you can imagine, the last 8 weeks have been also quite a, I must say, an emotional roller coaster for me as well, because the unit I'm responsible for will be also split in 2 parts. Our recent strategy announcement was indeed quite bold. The new, we will split basically all our business activities in 2 companies going forward. The new E.ON will focus on what we call the new energy world, and the new energy world is a world which is very customer-centric, which has clean technologies, which is much more decentral, and consequently, new E.ON will have 3 pillars: renewables, onshore, offshore, wind, and solar. Distribution, gas and electricity distribution, and the customer solutions business. We are servicing 33 million customers in many markets, and our ambition is clearly to, let's say, provide more energy efficiency solutions to them, to also strengthen our offering around sustainable cities, and obviously also to enhance our capabilities around distribution grids, which is a topic of today. They have to become much more smarter, more intelligent, and this will be our investment focus going forward, to incorporate the renewables feed in much better than before. And then there will be the new company, which will be spun off in a couple of months from now, which will focus on, let's say, the traditional, and I prefer the word traditional energy and not old-fashioned, sorry. It's conventional generation, upstream, and the trading business.
Thank you. So my next speaker here is Mr. Salya from EDF, from France. My question to you would be, sir, some TSOs, and we heard this from the CEO of one of the largest transmission system operators, from the CEO from 50 Hertz in Germany, said that grids are crucial to provide and allow for high shares of renewables, as we all know. And they have currently 40% variable power in their transmission system without any problems. So they would argue the precondition, it's very important, the precondition is very good grid and load management. That's the case in Germany. Is that also the case in France and other countries?
Okay, thank you for the question. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Really my pleasure to be here and give you some view of what we are doing in France and especially in EDF. So we are a big company. We generate 85% of our electricity CO2-free, 75% nuclear, and 10% renewable. The question of the grid, we believe that it's really a key question to cope with for development of renewable. In fact, in my own organization, the R&D organization of EDF, we develop big model energy studies about a mix of 60% of renewable in Europe, 60% renewable, 40% coming from variable energy, that's to say PV and wind, and 20% from hydro, more stable. What the key result of those analyses shows is that given the world scope of Europe, you have big variation of power. So we calculate for this mixed a value of 280 gigawatt of wind for the whole European territory. And this 280 gigawatt of wind has to match with big variation, big climate variation, big weather variation. It may range from 40 to 170 gigawatts. So given that those values, we believe that we need conventional generation. Conventional generation has to play a key part in the stability of the global grid at the European scale. So the volume of these conventional plants not going to be so small, by the way. So in that respect, we believe that nuclear business may play a role. We believe that we have to accommodate, in fact, variable renewable development together with nuclear business. We are doing that at that time, and we think that it could be a part of the solution, at least for France, but perhaps also for a part of Europe.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Bikairat, representing one of the largest PV companies for solar. Mr. Bikairat, I would like to know from you, since solar PV is growing significantly and costs decline actually by the hour, how do you anticipate grid issues? How do you work with grid companies? Do you leave that to the legislator, or do you leave it to the TSOs, or to the distribution system operators, or do you anticipate proactive grid and load management also in your company and together with the various actors?
Thank you, Stefan. I think the topic of solar integration to the grid and the argument that there has to be a curtailment to the depth of penetration of solar within the grid, I think that topic has been addressed on many levels, and from a First Solar standpoint, we were fortunate enough that we have built central utility-scale solar power plants that are of significant size to be a good case study. I mean, Agua Caliente is online for a while. It's 290 megawatt AC. We built the Desert Sunlight, 550 megawatts AC in one location, and now Topaz, another 550 megawatt AC. Really, the notion of solar penetration, I think the statement that we promote is that there is an important role for utility-scale solar power plants to support the reliability and stability of the grid. To your point, obviously, there is a role to the developer, to the technology, and there is a role, obviously, to the utility at the same time. From a power plant, solar power plant standpoint, if we look at it into three main categories, if you look at the grid stability and reliability, for example, modern controls added to the power plant, I think, are extremely important. If you look at the NERC regulations, North American Electric Reliability Regulatory Framework, they are putting conditions on solar power plant that solar power plants today can meet or exceed those conditions or regulations. I would even say better so than conventional power plants. Conventional power plants, they come in chunks. You're controlling a synchronous generator, 20 megawatt step. A solar power plant could be 550 megawatt and you control it from 0 on a wattage scale to 550 megawatts. The flexibility is there not because of the panel, it's there because of the inverter and the intelligence in the inverter. So, you know, conditions like fault right-through, grid stability, voltage regulation, power factor correction, solar power plants can do a better job at that than conventional power plants, and there's a role to play. If you go beyond that, from a utility standpoint, the argument comes that, you know, dispatchability of solar power plants. This goes back to forecasting. Utilities deal with load forecasting every day. They aggregate load balancing areas. There are mathematical models to approximate and predict with high level of accuracy solar. So that solves the issue of dispatchability and comes down again to the last point, which is grid flexibility and having a mix of generation that supports a low-cost LCOE. And I think utility-scale power plants can play an important role in parallel distributed generation and others.
Thank you. Our next panelist represents Abengoa. Mr. Bravo, please. CSP was once perceived as the most cost-effective solar power technology, but is growing slower than other renewable energy sources. What are the main reasons for this lower growth rate? Which are the differences and benefits of solar CSP towards its role in the energy mix and with regard to grids in particular?
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Well, first of all, let me explain that in Abengoa we are working in solar thermal energy, but we are working in all kinds of renewable and how we can integrate renewable with conventional. No? But in particular in solar thermal energy, we are the youngest brother in the renewable family. We have been born in the 2000s, and since then we have developed a huge effort in how to use the thermal process in order to be very, very efficient and to use the thermal capabilities in order to develop storage. And with those conditions, allow us in this moment to provide a dispatchable energy and to be very, very operational flexibility in the grid. And those both conditions allow us to provide, depending on how the customer needs the energy. For example, the last one project that we have in Chile, that is 24/7, that we provide 24/7 energy from solar. Or in the Phoenix, in Arizona, that we have developed a project of 280 megawatts with 6 hours of storage with molten salt. Well, in this period, we have developed the performance of the plant. We began with 28% of performance. Now we are close to 50%. The cost has gone down about 50%. But I think that we are in the middle of the way. We have to, and we are investing money, a lot of money, in how to be more efficient in performance and cost, and how to develop storage, and how we can integrate this renewable source, that is solar, thermosolar, with other sources in solar, with PV, and with conventional. We think that the future in energy is integration. And that's all.
Thank you. Our next panelist comes from the US. Dan Waizu from NREL, one of the most outstanding research institutions. Dan, California just announced to have 1/2 of all power output by 2030 from renewables, mostly solar. That's amazing. but that's California only, so to speak, important as it is. Is there also focus and targeted planning on renewables and beyond solar happening in other US states, or might the shale gas glut in US spoil the party?
That's a great question, Stefan, and it's good to be here. I'll give you the short answer now. Maybe we can embellish on it after we get a chance to do the questions and answers. So the short answer to the question is, in the U.S., we have 29 states that have mandates. And each state develops a set of policies based on the local conditions that they have. And as we go into grid transformation, or the grid modernization, as we call it in the U.S., the number of variables that have to be essentially decided on. And one of those is central station meets distributed generation. That will happen at different rates. It'll happen at certainly over time with different conditions, depending on a variety of variables that each state will have to weigh. As an example, Hawaii has a 50% mandate as well, and I think they are well on their way toward achieving that. It's complex. Lots of things that have to happen. There's a national program. We have about a $200 million research program to develop the tools and the capabilities to help us provide the tools for the states to make their own decisions. So much like the rest of the world, we see the 50 states in the U.S. doing things differently, but based on local conditions. And so there's a lot more to be said about that, but it is a program that is a Department of Energy priority. The President will request new funding for it, maybe double that funding over the course of the next couple of years. But there's a lot of work to be done, and I think the success of California will lead to other states to follow very quickly.
Thank you. My next speaker is also from the US. Chase Weir, your company, Distributed Sun, is helping New York State to reform their energy vision. How did you do that? And what did you do? And how had policies for grid integration and business models to change?
Thank you, Stefan. I think that's another great question, and actually complements what Dan just shared. I think first I would stipulate that over the next decade, we're going to see America revealing a preference for energy security, grid resilience, and consumer choice. All of that favors distributed renewables, distributed solar. I would further stipulate that I'm probably more representing New York State as a member of their delegation today than Distributed Sun, because they personify what I just stated. They have made a deliberate decision not to do large-scale solar like you see in the American Southwest, but to do it through distributed. So instead of a handful of sites, we're talking about thousands or tens of thousands of sites. I think we help them largely because Distributed Sun has built both utility scale and distributed. And there's a perfect example of this difference of integrating with the grid between the two. We just commissioned 20 megawatt of power in the state of Nevada. Our off-taker was the utility, NV Energy. It was a closed loop. They put out a bid, we won. All the interconnection upgrades and costs were costed to the project. We have a portfolio in New York State of about 40 megawatt across 12 different projects. And despite Governor Cuomo last year saying we're committed to renewables, despite the chair of the Utility Commission being committed to the Utility Business Model 2.0, despite the formation of a $1 billion green bank and $1.5 billion for solar support, when we ran our true solar screen, this risk assessment tool that we've built with the industry against these sites, it revealed not one, but multiple issues with interconnecting with the grid. And we actually had to appeal directly to the Commission to change those rules. It's a long list, I won't list them all, but the first one was not just net metering, but remote net metering. The ability to build on a site here, wheel that power a mile or 5 or 10 miles, the utility's not the customer, the commercial business is the customer, and we won that, and now last year hundreds of megawatt of development was unleashed. So it's both a good story and a bad story. We've basically unlocked fierce competition, and every major solar company in the U.S. is now in New York State.
Thank you, Chase. Our last panelist is representing one of the most interesting, sophisticated and opinion-making, let's say, body in the energy community in the world, the IEA. Paolo, you're leading the renewable energy work in the IEA. I think everyone is very keen on the IEA to look at their annual World Energy Outlook, referred by some as a Bible of the energy community. I wouldn't go that far. Anyway, the IEA undertook a few-year-long and very detailed project on looking into the needs for grid development management for ever-growing shares of variable renewable energy sources such as wind and solar in many countries, not only OECD. So, can we go comparably easy and economically to 100% renewable electricity still in the century once we get the grid right?